All right, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this 15th episode of the Sarasota Bay Deep Dive Series. Hard to believe we've done 15. My name is Darcy Young. I work with the Sarasota Bay Estuary Program here in Sarasota, Florida, where our mission is to restore and protect bays from the Venice Inlet to Anna Maria Sound. My guest on today's Deep Dive Series is Tracie Troxler. Hey there, Tracie.
Hey.
Tracie is the executive director of Sunshine Community Compost, a local organization that was founded in response to the growing needs in Florida to reduce food waste and regenerate local soils, community, and the planet. Sunshine Community Compost works to converge people from all sectors of society with nature and the interdependence of the web of life, and as a result of a path filled with hard work, passion, skill, leadership, teamwork, and a vision for regenerative and sustainable lifestyles and communities. Welcome, Tracie. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Darcy. Yeah, it's so good to be here. Thanks.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you started Sunshine Community Compost here?
Yeah, I can. Well, I'm actually from Manatee County. I'm from this area, and but I had left for about 20 years. I was out in California, and I was working in community-based healthcare, and that's where I really got to learn a lot about health and people and the connection between health and the planet. And from that place in healthcare, I moved into nonprofit solar energy, and then where I worked many, many years doing community-based work in renewable energy. And then I moved into agriculture. And agriculture is where I really started to look more closely at the soil and the connection between community health, food systems, the environment, and soil health and composting. And so when I came back to Florida after 17 years out there, I saw a soil challenge and a food waste challenge. And I had been exposed to so many different kinds of community and municipal programs around how we manage and use resources when I was out there. And so I wanted to see something different. And I also wanted to see more community gardens. And so, the best way to start a garden is to start looking at the soil. And so, well, let's start with the soil then. And so, so that's where I started. I started looking at composting because having healthy soil is where the best food grows from. And so I started running pilot projects. Not even having a nonprofit yet. I started running pilot projects around the community, wondering if people in this region would respond to composting. Having come from Florida, decades ago, and leaving thinking Florida was the same, and coming back and seeing that Florida has changed a lot, and so has the mindset. And so I started doing, I did a curbside compost pickup program. I did a school garden program. I did a farmer's market drop-off program. I did a restaurant pilot, and I did a city park drop-off program. And I was so amazed and relieved to see how much response that we get. Of course, all those were free, and they were run just out of curiosity. But I realized that each one of those ideas could have been fleshed out into its own program, its own business model. And so I said, okay, I think that where we need to start is with awareness and getting into the community before we start with, say for instance, a for-profit model. And that's really how we got started. And so I started looking around and looking for potential partners and saying, I think we need to start a nonprofit here. And so that's really where Sunshine Community Compost came out of. Was that idea, that history of community interaction, of the intersection between planet and people, and seeing that there was a need and a niche that wasn't being filled in this region, and how can we support and meet needs? So that's how we got started. And so now what we do, we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we are working with community members. We're working with organizations. We work with youth. We help people develop programs. We do direct service. We're really just, out there trying to be responsive to the community, and also, become as sustainable as possible as an organization, so we can continue to have a good mission impact. So, so that's kind of how things got going.
Well, thanks so much for that intro. I think Sunshine Community Compost is really one of the most responsive organizations I can think of in the area. It seems like you all have your hands in all sorts of different things, and it's so welcome, because I think it really was a community need. And you can see that from the kind of response that you're getting now, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. And because soil connects so many different things, and composting connects so many different things, we're basically operating above ground the same way things are going on underground. It's this rich network of relations, of all kinds of relations, right? And so in some ways it's like, composting is so rich and diverse. And it's like, well, we do have our hands in a lot of things, because it's hard to find where the separation point is, and that's really exciting, because everyone, it's always an opportunity to pivot and learn about so many different issues. We spend a lot of time educating around a wide range of interconnected issues. But it's a good adventure for sure. Yeah, seeing people come together around this. Yeah.
Great. So one of the topics that I wanted to talk to you about today, kind of one of the arms of Sunshine Community Compost outreach, was your efforts to raise awareness about intersections between waste reduction and ecosystem health. And I want to talk first about the concept of zero waste. Can you define what that term is and how you're kind of moving toward applying that concept here?
Yeah. Well, it's like the actual definition is a little bit different depending on who is putting it forward. But the essence of it, it's a goal or design strategies or a philosophy that really at the heart of it is reducing consumption in the first place, and designing systems, structures, products, so that you're designing with the end in mind. You're designing so that whatever it is does not become a waste. It becomes either a food source for the planet, or it becomes something that can go back into the market. And there is no byproduct that's ending up in the landfill. And so it's, and we do that by recycling, by reusing, by rethinking, by repairing, by remembering that everything that comes into, our space had a whole life before it got to us, and it has a whole life after it leaves us. And instead of opening up that cycle of return and making it a flat line from being produced to the landfill, we're turning it into a life cycle and turning it into something that regenerates new opportunities, new economy, new soil, new food, and it creates a positive for the future, instead of something that's going to leave a residue or a toxin or a landfill addition for the future. So that's basically what it is. And for me, first, it really grounded that concept. I understood recycling and composting and all that, but when I lived in San Francisco, I did a lot of volunteer work with the Department of the Environment out there. They have a city-funded, organization or whatever, department that is about the environment and educating the community about that. And so when I was doing, I ended up doing a lot of door-to-door education and outreach as a volunteer there. And we started doing, reducing styrofoam programs for businesses, and then looking at how do we safely recover motor oil. And, and we started getting into what about textiles, and what about, it wasn't just, it was like, how do you take these things and keep them moving, and how do we create a benefit out of them, and how do we reduce harm both at the same time? So that's when zero waste really started to sink in, because they had very aggressive or very assertive goals in front of them that I hadn't been exposed to before in any other community, really, at such a both government and grassroots level all at the same time. So once that settled in, that really shifted the way that I was operating in my life and the work that I was doing, either at that time in healthcare, renewable energy, and in agriculture. So
maybe we can talk a little bit about, what's the difference between recycling, which, we have very established programs here in this area for recycling, and like a zero waste resource recovery kind of effort. What's the gap between those two?
Yeah, well, I think that recycling is like a little bit later in the stages. In my mind, it's like it's something you want to do if you can't do other things before it, like not have an item that needs to be recycled in the first place, right? Because there's a bunch of energy and a bunch of resources that go into creating that. And we could actually just back it up a couple steps and not have that item that needs to be recycled in the first place, So it's looking at, if you're going zero waste, you're going to reassess first, what do you need to even recycle? So an example of that in my own life is that I used to run really large events out in California. And, what we do is like, oh, it's going to be zero waste because we're going to get a bunch of plastic water bottles to give out to the participants, right? And it's like, no. And that was early. I mean, that was, 15, 20 years ago, but still it's like, great, we're doing it. And it's like, no, back it up a step. Everyone brings their own water bottle. We don't create the need to recycle in the first place. And we need to recycle, no question. But if we're looking at it from like really looking at all the materials and looking at where they come from and where they go and understanding deeply what that means, it creates a sense of responsibility. Where do they end up? And that's really how I think it starts. And it's not common that those things are really transparent. You have to dig for it. And so, if it's not easily accessible, sometimes we might glaze over it. And so for me, that's where it's at. I mean, there are things that we're going to use, and you make decisions every day, and sometimes you move the needle left or right. But you can actually step back and say, do we even need that thing that needs to be recycled? And then if we look at also, what are the most quickly and most efficiently recycled items, right? So, if you look at like aluminum, right, it's like it's going to be 6 weeks, it's going to be back in a can on the store, right? And then you look at other materials that each time they get recycled, the quality goes down and the amount of, energy or toxins or whatever. So it's like, it's constantly, there's a constant decision-making tree, but it's not always apparent. And so I feel like part of what we're doing is just trying to help make those connections more transparent and continue to support choices that actually just, limit the amount of wasted resources that are happening from the beginning of the decision-making process and in the life cycle of materials. Does that address what
it does? Yeah. And I remember, starting to have these conversations with you a few years ago, and about how these efforts are related to local water quality, some of the things that we're concerned about here at the Estuary Program. And one of the projects that you started up at that point was called Zero Waste for Watersheds. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that program, what the goals were, and how the principles of zero waste are related to local water quality issues that we all experience.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so the first part is about the program, and the second is the connections. So the first part, that was a really fun project for us. So, having done zero waste events in the past and not seeing that happen in this region. So we really wanted to, when I came back to Florida, the topic is always water. The topic is always water. Water is everywhere. It's around us, it's under us, it's above us, it's everywhere. it's like, for me, I can't talk about anything without talking about water. I talked a lot about water in California, but it wasn't as, it's so much more alive here. And so, for us, it's like, a lot of my conversations around composting lead with the connection to water because it's so important. So I didn't know if as many organizations are looking at all these interconnections. And what we see is that there's a lot of organizations out there wanting to run special events, wanting to do great things that uplift their mission. And yet at the same time, a lot of those events are creating waste that are ultimately creating, something that's really not optimal. And it could be turned into a positive. And so we wanted to use the connection between waste and water as a way to educate around zero waste events. And so what we got to do was to talk to different staffs from different organizations, do a presentation that connected waste and water and composting to water as part of the zero waste profile, and then help them host zero waste events. And that got started in some cases an internal movement where now those organizations are trying to continue that process. And it also created a situation where people became aware of our service, and while they may not have the capacity to do it internally, they'll ask us to help them. So people know it's something that they can do, especially when youth are involved. So the idea for the program was like, let's help people understand where waste is coming from, where it's going, and how it connects to water, and then use that for an action. And here's the action you can take to support, healthy watersheds by reducing waste. And so so that's really how it went. And it was surprising to just go around and talk to different groups, and people don't know where their landfill is or how much material is going into it or how much plastic is, just little things that you just, that I think were valuable in terms of grounding the concept of reducing waste to help the water. So that was really fun, and we met a lot of people. And when you have an event, a lot of people come together that are from different sectors. So here you are hosting a station and sorting out plastic from food scraps, from liquids, from recycling, whatever. And people are going, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And so then there's this whole other level of education that's going on that's rippling through, because people gather, they learn, and they separate back out. And so that's that ripple, it's really fun too. And so, in terms of the connection between waste and the watershed, basically the ultimate message I feel is that what happens on the land happens in the water, and we can't separate those things. And so, we know that it's like 80% of the plastic in the ocean just came from the land, right? So we have to start thinking about how our actions are interconnected to the water, and the choices that we make in our products or in our programs or in our events, how that's going to ultimately affect the watershed. Because, the residents in Florida, our health, our happiness, our economy, it's all really, depending on the health of the water. And so when we start connecting all those things, I think that it becomes such a prime topic for healthy communities is healthy water. And, when you start talking about zero waste and, making sure that materials go where they're gonna find the channel to get to the place that they can be recovered and turned into something useful again. It's like, that's when you also start talking about composting, and so we spend a lot of time communicating that. How does compost relate to water? What does that have to do with water? How does my food scrap have to do with, the river or the ocean or whatever? And so, so we spend a lot of time communicating about that. And, you can look at it like, if you're using compost, right, you're using less fertilizers, and if you're using less fertilizers, then we have less risk of fertilizers running off, getting into the stormwater, getting into the bay, and starting to create those imbalances. If we put more compost in our soils, we help our soil hold more water, and that when water comes, it stays in place. That means we use less fresh water to water our landscapes or our gardens in the first place. And then we also have less runoff, And so, and then, people aren't always thinking like, hey, 30% or more of the food produced in the US is going to the landfill. And guess what? Like, we spent a lot of water watering that food so that we can put it in the landfill, So like, water in every stage of this situation. You know, and if we want to look at food scraps going into the landfill, creating greenhouse gas emissions, you know, and how does the warming of the planet affect the water? So there's just consistent messages around water and soil, you know, that we're always trying to weave in. You know, it's in us, there's no separation, you know?
Yeah. Well, and that's been so interesting, you know, talking with you over the years about how intersectional those things are. And, you know, I start thinking about, you know, even garbage trucks taking away your waste. And if you have a bunch of food scraps in your garbage can, it's going to weigh a lot more. It's going to be a lot more emissions coming out of that truck, which pollute our waterways as well. So
exactly.
You know, it really is just kind of every step of the way.
Yeah.
And so now that we're talking about composting, and you gave us a great overview of how compost and water quality are related, I thought we could talk about the neighborhood composting program, where residents bring their compostable scraps to common neighborhood sites. Can you tell us, I think you told us already about how that started as kind of a pilot project, but why the emphasis on community sites? You know, kind of in addition to your work to increase backyard composting, but I think the neighborhood composting is a unique feature.
Yeah. There's lots of reasons. There's so many reasons. I mean, the community part is one of the greatest advantages. And, you know, I had a sense of it, but I didn't know how rich it would become in terms of seeing people intersect at the composting sites, educating people within their communities, you know, and it's like bringing composting out where people play, where people live, where people work, and dropping it in. And that really spreads the awareness, I think, and, you know, it's a really sweet way. So, yeah. And, you know, and the thing about composting in our region is we don't have like one of those large scale facilities where we can take large volumes of composting, and those are also, they take a long time and they're very expensive to operate and to bring, you know, into action, to bring to the market. And community composting, you know, it's relatively low investment. It's you know, there's a lot less barriers in terms of getting those things up and running. And what happens is just that we're always doing outreach. We're always educating. It's like, you know, and when you're in the middle of the city park where people are already doing whatever they're doing, they just add composting onto it. Oh, I'm walking my dog and I'll bring my compost. I'm walking with my friends, I'll bring my compost. You know, I'm riding my bike across to my friend's house at the park, you know, I'm bringing my children in the stroller and the kids are involved, you know. So it's that we have constant access to educating all kinds of people, and we want the idea around composting to be accessible. We want it to be integrated as part of the culture, not separate from. We don't want to take it out far away, you know, like our, you know, the landfill for Sarasota County is in Nokomis, you know. It's like we're taking all those nutrients, we're dumping them in the landfill and we don't get them back, you know. And here, if we build and create compost in our communities, now it's a resource. And in some of the parks, even the neighborhood association will write like a grant and they'll do a neighborhood greening project. And in one of the parks, they decided to install a butterfly garden. And so we're out there in compost, you know, walking 10 feet over here and giving it to the butterfly garden, and the residents are installing it. And they can see that cycle, that this is a community asset, you know. So we want to keep nutrients in our communities. We want them to do good. We want them to, you know, help with the water, with the food, with creating interconnections. And we don't want to send them away where we're not going to ever get them again. You know, once they get locked in the landfill with all the other pollutants, we basically, you know, we're pulling it out and not giving it back. And so it really creates a serious imbalance, you know. So So the community is important. It's really fun. It's so fun.
How many of those sites do you have operating now?
In Sarasota, we have 3 operating in Sarasota. We have one in Manatee. Those are official. And then we've worked with some organizations who now have their own internal community composting programs. And also some of the residents that graduated from those projects have started their own in their neighborhoods. So in some of the even closed neighborhood communities, you know, some people have really just, you know, they've owned it, and we've consulted with them, and now they're up and running doing their own thing. So, and that's an optimal outcome. Yeah.
So you mentioned some of these. I'm getting some feedback on my mic here. Let's try again. You mentioned some of these partnerships that you've built, and some of them are unique and really cool. I'm wondering if you can describe a few of them to us, how you partner with government, nonprofit, other organizations to make this all work.
Yeah, it's a good thing for partners. Partners really help things move. So, there's a bunch of examples. I think one of the first partnerships, we had a partnership with the city of Sarasota and the residents of Gillespie Park. So that was, here you have a neighborhood association and a government entity and a nonprofit, and working together to decide, is this a good place to start a community composting project? So that's been really fun, because then you forge relationships with the neighborhood association, for example, and then they spread the word throughout their neighborhood, and then they start getting connected to other neighborhood associations,
Mm-hmm.
So it benefits all the partners along the way. We had a partnership. We started when we did the Zero Waste for Watershed program. That started over at Moat Marine, and that led into we were doing helping them with some of their large events to do the zero waste stations, sorting out the materials, educating with the staff, and then that turned into they also side by side wanted to start an in-house composting program. So they have some in-house composting programs going on, and then we have out of that, then we have residents that work at Moat that are finding us in the parks, and now we have more park program participants, and now they're looking to expand their community composting work and through that work with other organizations in their region. So it's just this really rich web. And the Sarasota Bay Estuary program has helped us, through the Zero Waste for Watershed program, forge those partnerships. And then one of the community composting projects got started out of support with the Sarasota Bay Estuary program. And so then that started, its own, chain of events. So that's been really fun, and even working with the schools, it's like we're starting in the school garden. Now we're working at the STEM night. Now we're working with PTO. Now we're working at the art show, and now we got funding from a chamber of commerce that's going to help us start a program for kids right next door to the school. It's just, it keeps going like that. So we're trying to track it. And the ultimate thing is to have people have the capacity and the knowledge and the tools to take the idea and move it in their own, keep growing it according to their local community, whether it's a business or a school or a town or whatever. So we want to building capacity and helping make those interconnections, and then see people just keep going with it, Yeah, it's been really fun. Yeah.
So we've really focused on the neighborhood composting and the Zero Waste for Watersheds, but I'm wondering if there are other priority projects for Sunshine Community Compost that you want to chat about while we're here.
I think the other projects that we spend time on, it's really important for us that we continue working with youth and doing youth education and seeing school projects come up because kids, they're basically, we got it. We're learning everything. We're learning math, we're learning science, we're learning composting, we're learning water, whatever, give it to me, and they get it and they move it, It's not like a thing, you don't have to they're just like, all right, sure, yeah, put my food scraps here. Okay, great, it's in the garden. And so we want to keep, continuing to work with youth as much as possible. We'd like to see our programs grow, and we're working internally to see what is the best model to scale up the programs that we're doing to reach more communities, because we have people reaching us from all kinds of places. I mean, all over the state, all over the county. We have, that's how composting works, so we'd like to be able to, scale up the current programs. We'd like to continue working with youth. We'd love to see more for businesses. That's something that is in the field. With COVID and everything, there's a lot of shifts that we're trying to be adaptable to around a number of concepts that we have been fleshing out for growing composting and the idea around composting. And then we really like to bring as many different kinds of organizations together around composting when we do an initiative during International Compost Awareness Week. And so we try to host an event where we can pull in different groups that represent the different interconnections to soil and composting and celebrate it, and educate, and keep growing, keep growing the work, infiltrating it through the community. So, yeah, we had to cancel that this year, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That was going to be in Gillespie Park, right in where our first compost site was set up. And, that really gives it that neighborhood feel that people can come right out of their house, come hang out, come learn, participate, and then, head right back home or, get on their bike and cruise out of there. But, it's an interesting time, and we're trying to be as adaptable as possible. And we want people to feel safe and healthy and, comfortable coming back out to our community compost sites, which are all open, by the way. Which is, we're recommending masks and, and gloves for people that's, we want people to still be safe, but they're open and they're available. And we want, to keep them growing, because before COVID, we had compost food scraps, up to here, which is a good thing. There's thousands and thousands of pounds of food scraps that are turning into healthy soil for the community and healthy relationships. So it's good.
Right. Well, and what a great excuse to go outside at least a couple times a week,
Exactly. Yeah, we have them all in beautiful spots in the park. So come see us.
Yeah. I mean, even I backyard compost, and even that is like, I'm going outside.
It's so true. I mean, and we had people all throughout when we were sheltering in place that were like emailing, like, I can't throw my food scraps away. I can't. And then we had people who were like, we need a home composting bin. We're going to get all our friends who are part of the project, that they felt safe with, So it did kind of shift, because some people, they just couldn't take it. I just can't throw it away. And I'm like, I hear you, but we really wanted to find out what were the industry standards. What are the composters around the nation doing to implement best practices for safety and health? And, so, you just have to, everyone had to pause. We had to all pause and do some rethinking. But we see this uptick in people making meals at home. Right. And so there's more food scraps and there's more awareness of the food coming in and out because people are in all the time. So I think that is something that, got some other people thinking a little bit more about composting as well. So, all the data is not out, as things reopen. But, we're still trying, we're open, we're listening, we're trying to be as responsive as we can with the resources that we have. Yeah.
Cool. So I'm thinking maybe we can talk about maybe a few actionable tips for individuals who are watching this program. What can people do in their homes, in their workplaces to reduce waste while improving soil health? And where can they learn more about how to do those things?
Yeah, well, of course, composting.
Yeah.
So it's not that hard. People can compost at their businesses. It's not that hard, and we're happy to help you get set up. We're happy to teach your staff. We'll come in for lunch or do a Zoom call or whatever, and just help people understand how easy it is. And the composting, it's not complicated. It's happening all the time. So we can help with, if people want to compost, start composting at their work sites. If people want to compost at home, we're going to be putting out this week a list of upcoming classes and things like that. So sign up for our newsletter. And you can find out where we're going to be and where we're going to be teaching and training. And also, if you want to volunteer, you get a chance to have, come out to the sites, see what composting looks like, have someone explain it to you while we're out there, making things look pretty and that kind of thing. And I also think, it's a good time every now and then. It's good to have a little adventure in zero waste and or composting. So you could also consider take a week and reassess the things, the materials, what is in your life and what you need and don't need, and experiment with what it might be like to go zero waste for 1 week. Get your whole family involved in it, or just try composting for a week. Join one of our park projects and see what it's like for you. I mean, we often find that once people start doing it, it's hard to go back because they don't see this as waste anymore. This is now a valuable resource that's helping grow the future. And so it's like, oh no, I'm ruined. Banana peels, I can't throw them away anymore. We get that. I've had people say that to me. You're ruined, So, and that's an optimal outcome because the idea, a lot of these challenges are just about a shift in perspective. And when we stand at a different corner of the room and look at it from the resource perspective, things change. So yeah, so check us out. We're happy to help. We're happy to consult. We're happy to help set up programs. We're happy to just teach. And we also have helped some people that are not comfortable getting that compost bin set up, and they need help getting that first start at home. They just need that little launch. So we can help with that as well. So, reach out. We're here to help.
Awesome. And then I wanted to ask you kind of what your vision is for composting and resource recovery in this region. Yeah. Just as a kind of parting thought for us.
Yeah. I mean, my vision is that it's part of the culture. It's how we begin with the end in mind. Everything we do is about the return. We start with the return in mind, and that we have a culture of composting, that we have a culture of regeneration, of reciprocal relationships with each other and the planet. And, a good starting point for that is composting, because we are receiving that food and all that it took to get there, so we can just give it right back. Yeah. So I'd like to see a culture of composting food scraps, composting old ways, habits and behaviors, and creating a culture of regeneration. That's what I would love to see. It's happening. We're doing it. All of us. It's all happening. So
I see it. Okay, Tracie. Well, this was really fun. And I want to thank you for your work and for joining me today. And it was so good just to see you and talk to you. And I look forward to seeing you in person someday.
Yeah, definitely. We really appreciate it. I really appreciate being here and just being able to connect and talk about this stuff, and everything that the Sarasota Bay Estuary Program has done to support our work and see it ripple into the community. So thank you, and thank everyone who's out there listening and watching. We appreciate it.
Great. Okay. Well, and thanks to the audience. Great to have you here again, and we will be back next Tuesday with another deep dive. That one will be a little bit different. It is with the Sarasota Passive Acoustic Listening Stations Network. We're actually going to have 3 different people on the interview with me, which is going to be fun. The first time I've done a more than one person interview. And these folks do really cool work. They listen to animals and human noises underwater, actually, and use that information to study how animals move around the bay. Really, really cool. And that's going to be with Dr. Athena Rissick at New College of Florida, Dr. David Mann at Loggerhead Instruments, and Dr. Catherine McHugh at the Sarasota Bay Dolphin Research Program. So definitely be here again next Tuesday at noon. And until then, I hope you have a great week. And thanks again, Tracie.
Okay, bye.